732 BC. After a year-long siege of the city, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III began the offensive. With the skillful use of catapults and specific siege equipments known as Great Flies, the Assyrians collapsed the walls and entered the city of Damascus. Everyone has two homes. The first one is where he was born. The second is where his ancestors were born and lived. The earliest mention of Syria in classical literature occurs to the works of Aeschylus and Herodotus, at the time when the Greeks became acquainted with Assyria. It was a province of the vast Roman Empire. The name of Syria was formed as a result of the Greek mispronunciation of Assyria. In times past, Syria included the countries known as Aram in the Old Testament. Those were Assyria, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, and Palestine, the entire area spread over Egypt into Arabia, the Tigris, and Cilicia. The land of Syria encompasses an immense collection of cultural and historical monuments. Over time, it has been repeatedly ruled by Phoenicia, Assyria, the Hittite Empire, Rome, Persia, Egypt, Babylon, the Damascus Kingdom, Byzantium, and the Arab Caliphate. Each of them has left definite architectural tracks of their power.
The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote that the Greeks called the Assyrians by the name Syrian, dropping the A. And that's the first instance we know of the distinction in the name of the same people. Then the Romans, when they conquered the western part of the former Assyrian Empire, they gave the name Syria to the province they created, which is today Damascus and Aleppo. So that is the distinction between Syria and Assyria. They are the same people, of course, and the ancient Assyrian Empire was the first real empire in history. What do I mean? It is that it had many different peoples included in the empire, all speaking Aramaic and becoming what may be called Assyrian citizens. That was the first time in history that we have this. For example, Elamite musicians were brought to Nineveh and they were made Assyrians, which means that Assyria was more than just a small country. It was the empire, the whole Fertile Crescent.
The people of Syria, together with the Mesopotamians, made up a Semitic tribe called Arameans. Little is known about the prehistoric power structure of Syria. In ancient times, each city with its nearby villages and farmlands represented an independent state. fabulous Damascus was one of them. For many hundreds of years, Damascus has been a constant war stage for foreign invaders. Like no other modern city in the world, Damascus has been influenced by a spectacular patchwork of diverse cultures and peoples. During its existence, the city has been a witness to the passage of every historical era, starting from the Neolithic. Like any major city in the world, the present-day Damascus is also touched by new high-technology mainstreams, and yet one can still feel significance of age-old discoveries. The old city, the heart of Damascus, still exudes a spirit of historical reminiscence. It's so easy to get misled in the labyrinth of the narrow, winding medieval streets, or when walking along the geometrically exact squares of the Greek-Roman quarters. Even the stones are scarcely preserved here. The remnants of the Roman constructions, like worthless scraps, are negligently scattered throughout the old city. For many centuries, legendary Damascus attracted various cultures and peoples to itself. The fertile Barada River Valley and the Ghouta Oasis were continually visited by merchants, invaders, adventurers, and pilgrims enthralled by the fame of Damascus masters and rumors of the city's rich markets. As the legend has it, this is the land where Cain killed Abel, and where the biblical king Nimrod was buried. Damascus was where the temple to Jupiter was erected, and where Apostle Paul adopted Christianity. Here is the Umayyad Mosque, the largest and oldest mosque in the world, located in the old city of Damascus. Muslims considered it to be one of their holiest mosques. The mosque holds a shrine which is said to contain the head of John the Baptist, honored as a prophet by both Christians and Muslims. Eight gates gave entrance to Damascus. Today, the quarter between the gates of Bab Duma and Bab Sharq is inhabited by Christians. People belonging to various Christian communities, such as Armenians and Orthodox Syrians, live here. Narrow streets twist through the depth of the suburb, where proud churches of Catholic, Syriac Orthodox, and Armenian apostolic faiths rise grandiosely into the sky from among residential buildings. Aleppo, the second largest city of Syria, is one of the ancient settlements on Earth, with a history dating back more than 5,000 years. The centuries-old center of the Great Silk Road, located some 360 kilometers north of Damascus, is rich in historical monuments. The 12th century Citadel of Aleppo, erected in the place of an old acropolis, is a distinguished example of the medieval Arab fortification art. Along with neighboring mosques, churches of different beliefs are peacefully placed on the dazzling background of the eastern city. Those shrines are revered by every Christian. A few years ago, a miracle happened in the courtyard of St. Joseph Chaldean Church in Aleppo. The statue of Virgin Mary started crying bloody tears. Countless pilgrims now come to pray and venerate the Mother of God at this site. Each Christian community, snuggled around its belief, lives a distinctive life and shares a principal goal: upholding Christianity and national traditions.
The Assyrians, like Armenians and Jews, in urban areas in particular, lived around their places of worship. We have to remember that people did not have modes of transportation other than walking, especially for people considered by Islam to be dhimmis. There were at times restrictions on whether they could even ride a horse. Sometimes if they had to ride, they were forced to ride donkeys, for example. So that people needed to live within walking distance of their places of worship. So that among the Assyrians then, you had the Monophysite, that is the Syriac Church, the Syriac Catholic Church, the Chaldean Catholic Church, and of course the Church of the East, which had their community, their members, living within walking distance of the churches, so that they became somewhat confined to their own communities and did not necessarily have much to do with the other communities, partly because of religious denominational reasons and partly because of distance. Although the language was something that they shared, depending on which part of the Middle East they came from, and the writing system, of course, was the same. Still, there were dialects that affected communications as well.
Medieval Syria, the richest province of the Roman Empire, occupied the approximate area extended from the southeast end of Asia Minor to the upper banks of the Jordan, and from the northeast shores of the Mediterranean Sea to the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates. In the works of medieval Armenian historians, particularly of Moses Khorenatsi, the Roman province of Syria was called Asorik, the Syriac people, Asoriner, and the classical Syriac language, Asoririn. So who were the peoples who inhabited this land in the early period of Christendom? As far as scholars believe, the ethnic composition of Syria in early Christian times was not homogeneous. It consisted of Syrian Arameans, Hellenized people who had dwelt in these areas since the end of the 2nd millennium BC, Phoenicians, descendants of Greek colonists, nomad Arabs, and Roman veterans. Several small independent city-states were formed in the Roman era to the east and southeast of Syria. Aramean Palmyra was one of the prosperous city-states. Central part of Syria contains vivid green oases, with hot springs amid wind-blown sand dunes and occasional shrubs. In early Christian times, there was a famous oasis settlement, having the hot spring Efka as its only source of life. Caravans used to stop here to have a rest under the fascinating shadows of palm trees. A flourishing city gradually emerged here, later becoming the leading caravan city on the east-west route. The Aramaic name of Palmyra is Tadmor, City of Palms. The word Palmyra is a synonym for beauty. However, this description does not only refer to the times when the city reached the pinnacle of its greatness, a time when the kings of Palmyra were titled emperors, equal to the Roman rulers, and commanding the Roman legions in Asia. Nor does it refer to when Palmyra was the capital of the Middle East. The ruins of the city are still amazing with their beauty and splendor. In the second half of the 3rd century, under the reign of Queen Zenobia, Palmyra ruled over Egypt and much of Asia Minor. Zenobia proclaimed herself empress and even considered marching against Rome, but in 272 AD she was eventually defeated and captured by the Roman Emperor Aurelian. What followed was the sunset of Palmyra, one of the most blooming and ravishing cities of the Orient. Panem et Circenses, bread and circus games. Theatrical performances were undoubtedly one of the significant features of medieval Syrian public life. The Middle Ages witnessed a severance of ties with classical drama and a return to its dramatic folklore traditions. Stage performances spanned mime, pantomime, circus entertainments, fist-fighting, and gladiatorial combats. Theater art was so developed in Syria that many of the country's talented masters acting in different stage art genres were periodically invited to Rome.
There is a long period in the history of the world theater which is not researched so far. It dates back to the 5th through the 12th centuries, beginning from the collapse of the Roman Empire up to the formation of the European national kingdoms. The European literature researchers call this time period Greek, Syriac, Coptic, followed by the Western period Latin, Celtic, German. I would call the Greek, Syriac, Coptic period Assyrian Armenian as well, because the Armenians too belong to that period. Syria, or Assyric as the Armenians call it, was the leader in this aspect, for since the fall of the Roman Empire, it had become the main shelter of the Roman theatrical traditions. The facts are based in the existence of the ruins of theaters, which were many in the Middle East. In Syria, there were theaters in Edessa, Jabail, Basrah, Gaza, and Sirius. I counted only 5, but there were probably more. Several facts point out that the mimic theater in particular developed and prospered in Syria or Assyric. The most interesting fact referring to this is the speech of a 5th century scholar, Horicius, in support of the mimic theater. The theory on rejecting of the theater art developed even long before the early pre-Christian ages. Different speeches against theater were being written. That means the social communication system which was functioning before the Christian era, was outdated, while Christianity brought about a new setting of social communication, the church rejecting the old system.
The Amphitheater in Basrah, one of the finest monuments of the Roman era, has been miraculously preserved in its original form. Basrah is most famous for its magnificent Roman amphitheater, which was later converted into a fortress by the Ayyubids. The original theater seats 15,000 people, and its stage is 45 meters in length and 8 meters in depth. Its acoustic design is such that all members of the audience can hear the actors without the use of any special equipment. There is a large area in front of the stage that might have been used for circuses or gladiatorial matches. Malula. It's an Arabic word meaning entrance. It's a tiny island of Christianity. With an amazingly conserved ancient Aramaic as its spoken language. Aramaic is one of the oldest languages in the world, having passed down to our days. Formed in the 9th century BC, it was primarily the language of the Semitic tribes wandering across the Middle East region. Despite the fact that the Arameans were not united and didn't enjoy statehood, the language eventually became the lingua franca, meaning the language for international contact. In the Near East and the language of diplomacy up to the times of the triumphal invasions of Alexander the Great.
On the Christian side, we see another old literary form of Aramaic, so-called classical Syriac, based on the Aramaic dialect of Edessa, still being the liturgical language of some of the Middle Eastern churches, like the Syriac Orthodox Jacobite Church, or the Assyrian Nestorian Church of the East, or the Chaldean Church in Iraq, or the Maronite Church in Lebanon. But Syriac is not just a liturgical language, it is also the language of a very rich cultural and spiritual heritage of the parishioners of those churches, who are mainly Arameans by origin, although they are very often believed to be Christian Arabs, as they speak Arabic in their daily lives. And here we come to the strongest point when we call in question the dead status of Aramaic, and that is that some of those Aramean communities not only use Aramaic as a liturgical language, but also as a language as a spoken language. There are at least 3 so-called Neo-Aramaic or Modern Aramaic languages that still survive in isolated pockets throughout the Middle East and Caucasus.
Aramaic was spoken in Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. Today, the Aramaic spoken in Malula harks back to that ancient past. But other forms of Aramaic survive in larger pockets, mainly spoken by the Assyrians of the Middle East. The language of Jesus survives, but as the smallest Semitic language to this day.
بلوتا أوبا يعصروا في نسمن تيادودا وكل ما حكين أرومي ويبن أروم بول شهولوك ثويبا شو من خثبا وش إيشو مترستر وعم خثبيلا ومقريلا وكل أجنبوي عم مسبيلا وعم مسبيل اختبويا أيضا إثلث بلوت هين هوخا محكيان سريون بخعة ومعلولة وبخعة وقبعون هثنون يوميل غزوثة أسلم إلا معلولة شبكت يعني هثنون هن صرقوي ومحكين خت بأرومي هوخا غبين حسوريا شوث فرقة لا صرقة ولا كوريا.
A few Christian shrines still stand in Malula. The convents of St. Thecla and St. Sergius Marsargis are the most valuable. According to popular belief, the defile goes back to the story of the first Christian girl martyr, St. Thecla. Converted to Christianity through Apostle Paul's preaching, she was persecuted by her own parents and chased by the soldiers of the Roman governor, who wished to put her to death. Suddenly, coming face to face with the impassable mountain, she had no possible way to escape. She then prayed to God to save her, and he split the mountain, thus allowing her a provisional escape. The convent of St. Thecla belongs to the Greek Orthodox community. The convent of St. Serge and its church were built in the 4th century in honor of 2 martyrs of Syrian origin, Serge and Bacchus. The present Arab Republic of Syria is a unique Middle Eastern country. It has traditionally provided a hospitable environment for all national minorities, often enjoying a fraternal relationship to them. Syria represents a blend of historical monuments of various civilizations and a place where Eastern and Western cultures have met. Visitors to Syria can go back some 3,000 years to the times of Roman Empire or feel the breath of the Arab Caliphate. The Syrian land enshrines a wide range of holy sites with the living history of Christianity. It continues to inspire and unite people down to our days.